Dawn came to the red keep like a smear of ash across a pale sky, washed thin by the sea wind. From his bedchamber window, Eddard Stark watched gulls turn above the Blackwater and thought of ravens. One of his own had gone north at midnight, bound for Dragonstone and Stannis Baratheon with a hand-written letter wrapped close beneath its wing. And another, less faithful bird had flown somewhere else, though no man in the tower had loosed it. Ned had not slept since he saw that second shadow lift into the night. He had sat instead with Jon Arryn's heavy book open before him and the phrase that would not relent. The seed is strong, gnawing at his bones like cold. The air in his chambers still smelled faintly of boiled leather and crushed mint, the remedies the city barber surgeon had rubbed into his bad leg. He shifted, and the old wound whispered of knives. He set that whisper aside. The hand of the king had no luxury for pain and less for doubt. In the stone corridor beyond, he heard the changing of the guards, the shuffle of boots, the rasp of a sword belt, a Northman clearing his throat. The sound was steadying. Steel and breath, men he knew, loyalties he could name. "Tomard," Ned called. Fat Tom's face filled the doorway, flushed, with a hawk's feather caught in his hair. His beard had crumbs from a hurried meal. "Find Desmond. I want 20 of our men at the door to the council chamber before the hour. Not in the coats of Winterfell. Gold cloaks if they can be had." Quietly, Fat Tom blinked. "The gold cloaks, Lord? Janos Slint's men? They'll not put our lads in their livery." "They will if their captain commands it," Ned said. "This morning we will have no mistakes." Tomard frowned toward the window where the dawn brightened. He was slow, never dull. "Aye," he said at last. "And Slint, Lord? Send to him as well." Ned turned a page. The drawn lines of the old genealogies crawled like vines across parchment, deeper than the names they bracketed. "Tell him I desire his company for the session." When Tomard had gone, Vayen Poole brushed in. His steward's hands were neat even at this hour, a roll of accounts tucked under his arm, his eyes wary. "The Lord Grand Maester sends his apologies for the hour, my lord. He would wait upon you in his chambers. Says there's a draft to ease your leg." "I will wait upon him," Ned said, closing the book. "And I have no need of his poppy. Have the men ready. If Ser Barristan comes, he is welcome." The corridors below ran cool and close, smelling of dust and oil and the thin ash from last night's fire. Servants bent their heads and scurried. They carried baskets of stale bread for the morning kitchens, bundles of rushes, ewers of water. The Red Keep woke and pretended normalcy. Ned leaned on his cane more to hide the stiffness than from need, and as he moved he marked each guard. 2 of his own with gray and white cloaks, honest steel at their hips and Winterfell's direwolf on their brooches. A pair of Lannister men-at-arms at the turn by the Queen's apartments, each with a lion stitched in red enamel on his breast and the smugness of the secure. The King's Guard were nowhere to be seen, which could be either comfort or warning. Pycelle's chambers clung to a curve of the inner ward, a suite that had grown like a barnacle to power decades ago and never been scraped away. When Ned entered, the smell hit first. Dried herbs and the sweet rot of old flowers, a tincture of fennel, the tannic sting of boiled bark. Grand Maester Pycelle rose as if he'd been waiting at the edge of his chair the entire night. His chain lay heavy across his thin chest, links of gold and silver and black iron for the several medals of learning, the pride of Old Town that had sent him to serve 3 kings and outlive the last. "My Lord Hand," Pycelle croaked with a small bow. "A grim hour to seek counsel." "It is when counsel's needed," Ned said. His eyes passed over shelves heavy with scrolls and bottles. A table with a mortar and pestle stained the color of blood, a potted herb drooping from neglect. There were ravens in a smaller adjoining roost, he knew. The coals of the fire had not yet been stirred. "You sent a bird last night, Grand Maester." Pycelle blinked, a long blink, careful. "My duties demand it at times. Petitions from the faith, questions from Old Town, a quarrel between guilds. The city greases itself with messages, else it seizes. And the one you sent was to the Queen." A pause, almost imperceptible. "The Queen's Grace is often in need of learned advice."
Ned stepped nearer.
The hand of the king is more in need of obedience. The bird that flew from your roost last night bore words I had not given you leave to carry. He drew out the folded parchment he had found on Pycelle's table earlier, tucked beneath the corner of a ledger as if by accident, though the wetness of the seals told another tale. He had snapped the thread with his own fingers and read their transcript. Pycelle saw the paper as if it were a sword. "Ah," he said, breath-sighing. "A trifling reassurance, my lord. An old man soothing a troubled heart. Her Grace, the Queen, shows maternal concern. You must not misread an old man's zeal to calm storms." Maternal. Ned let the word lie on his tongue. He had expected anger to come in a gust, a northern squall. Instead, a colder thing settled, deliberate. When the hand sends for replies to the king's brother, and the queen learns of it in the same hour, that is more than a storm kiss. John Arryn died, Grand Maester. He died under your care. He had a book in his hand and questions on his lips. You told me the book was yours to lend. Ned held his gaze. You lent more than paper. The old man's wattles trembled. You are ill-served by your suspicions, Lord Stark. I have served the realm. As you judged the realm, Ned said. I have men outside, and I have the king's authority in my body. I relieve you of your duties, Pycelle, pending trial. Hand your chain to Ser Barristan. He had chosen Barristan Selmy for this moment because the old knight's honor wore no livery and bent to no house but the crown. From the hall beyond, boots ringed. Ser Barristan stepped in with a sound like winter wind, white cloak trailing, face carved from the same stone as the keep. With him came 2 gold cloaks in full harness and 3 of Ned's men. The gold cloak's eyes raced, taking in the collection of stoppered vials, the glint of Pycelle's chain, and then returned to their captain. Pycelle put a hand to his chest as if to stem a pain. This is preposterous, he said thinly. I am the Grand Maester of the Citadel. The Conclave has set this chain about my neck. Only the king, and his hand, Ned said. In his absence, he held out his palm. Time could hold a breath, in the silence of a roosting room that smelled of elderflowers and vinegar. Pycelle's fingers scrabbled at metal. He lifted the chain as if it weighed a mountain, and for a heartbeat Ned saw fury in those rheumy eyes, a sharper thing than age. Then Pycelle let the chain fall into Ser Barristan's hands with a clink like a door locking. The old knight's mouth compressed, but he said nothing. His white gauntlet fingers held that weight as if it were a dying child. The black cells, Ned said. Keep him safe. He will have food and fresh bedding, and a priest if he wants one. But let no raven fly from this tower carrying his voice. If you find one, clip its wing. The 2 gold cloaks took Pycelle softly, almost with pity. It would not do to bruise a man who had brewed midnight for half the city. Pycelle went without struggle, his lips moving, perhaps in prayer, perhaps in an inventory of enemies. Barristan Selmy turned the chain in his hands once, twice, as if testing it for truth, then gave it to one of Ned's gray-cloaked guards. You will need to send a message to Old Town, he said. The Conclave will not like this manner of dismissal. They will like treason less, Ned replied. His cane found the floor, comforting. Walk with me, Ser Barristan. They went into the corridor where morning light had dared to push a single lance into the gloom. Ned did not have to look to know Varys would be somewhere near the angle of the hall waiting to become visible. He was a creature born of corners. He should have a chain of flies about his neck, the hand thought sourly, for prayers to all manner of gods. When Varys did appear, it was with his hands modestly folded, his robe the soft purple of bruised grapes. My lords, he said, and his voice poured like oil. The castle wakes. There is a hint of honey cakes in the kitchens if either of you cares for breakfast. We will break our fast in the council chamber, Ned said, looking past him toward 2 shadows that stirred and resolved into Renly Baratheon and Peter Baelish both. He had asked and had received. That was something. Renly wore green like a spring field, a bit too bright for the hour. Littlefinger had already applied his smile. You've a hard look this morning, Lord Stark, Renly said. "Can you not let your leg rest a day?" "My leg rests poorly when ravens fly where they should not." Ned let Renly see the steel in his eyes. "In the council chamber, my lord. All of us." He took his place with the Iron Throne's shadow at his back, and the city spread unseen beneath the stone. The council table was a scarred old plank polished by elbows and spilled wine. Varys arranged his sleeves as if the wood offended him. Littlefinger moved a knife idly through his fingers, his attention on its point. Renly looked like he wished to be out on the yard with a lance, not tethered to arguments. Only Ser Barristan stood like a spear planted, white and still. "The Grand Maester has been relieved of duties," Ned said without preamble. "I have ordered him held in the black cells for sending private messages to the Queen about matters under the seal of the hand." Littlefinger's knife stilled. "Gods," he said lightly. "Grand Maester Pycelle? He's older than Aegon's conquest. The cells will offend him. He much prefers mattresses." Renly frowned. "You have proof he sent such messages? Or only a suspicion, my lord?" "I have his letter." Ned placed the open parchment on the plank, its script as careful as a monk's. Varys's eyes slid over the neat lines with something like satisfaction, or perhaps that was only his face. "He would have me be less hasty in sending to Dragonstone." He wished to reassure her grace I had been reminded of my place. Renly's mouth twisted. "Your place is the king's hand. It seems Pycelle has sometimes mistaken hands," Littlefinger said, and the corner of his mouth lifted. "If you send him to the cells, you'll singe the queen along with his whiskers." "She is singed already," Ned said. "She knows what I seek. Whether she guessed it 10 days ago or last night's raven told her, it amounts to the same. I will not have the king's secrets dressed and sent to her bedchamber. And I will not have false counsel in the king's chair." Varys let a soft breath escape. "This is very bracing, my lord. There is a clarity in winter air that the summer lacks, I've always found." "Is that so?" Renly said dryly. "And what of the king's hunt? He rides today, and the queen will ride with him to the first camp. She will not appreciate hearing her maester is thrown to the rats while she's on the road." Ned's jaw clenched. "The king rides if he wishes," he said. "I'd sooner his boots stay on the ground a day. There's business that should be done before he goes. We might send a litter to the queen so that you can explain this, exigency," Varys said. "Or, failing that, you might explain it to Lord Janos Slynt in a way he can carry to her grace." "Send for Slynt," Ned said. "I'll explain it to him in a way he cannot mistake." Janos Slynt found his way to the chamber with the smell of fish and iron about him. He was a compact man with slicked hair and a mouth that rarely smiled unless counting coin. The gold cloak suited him far too well. He made a bow that felt like a man trying on a finer coat than he owned. "My lord hand." He looked from face to face, landing longest on Petyr Baelish. "You wish to see me?" "I did." Ned planted his hands on the table. "Grand Maester Pycelle has been arrested and removed to the black cells. There will be no disorder in the city for it. I want a double watch on the Red Keep and a half-strength patrol near the Street of Silk. No one enters or leaves the Queen's apartments without passing my men." Slynt's eyebrows gave a little jump. "Your men, my lord? Gold cloaks, if you prefer. Loyal ones." "Ned Stark," Littlefinger murmured, "has decided to play Slynt at Slynt's own game." The captain's lips pinched. "The watch keeps its own order, my lord. We answer to the city as ever." "You answer to the crown," Ned said. "And the crown is not a lion painted on your door. I am the crown's hand." He paused. "You will be paid for every extra man you post, Janos. The Exchequer will see it done." He did not look at Petyr Baelish when he said Exchequer, but he let the word settle. Littlefinger spread empty hands. "I serve as the Exchequer's servant in all things, my lord. The city survives cough by cough on what we can scrape together. Still, we can always scrape something for a good cause." "Keep your men close," Ned told Slynt. "If there's blood in the street over this, I'll have your head. And you may pass that along to any of your sergeants who feel like throwing in with the lions." Slint swallowed. Then a slow smile broke. The smile of a man who had been threatened by lords long enough to know when to take his profit. The Lord Hand can rely on the watch, he said. We keep order. All we ask is to be paid, Littlefinger said brightly. And so you shall. God give me patience and a taller purse. When the captain had gone, Renly's eyes met Ned's squarely. You mean to move on the queen? I mean to hold her where I can see her, Ned said. She rode roughshod over John Arryn's last days. She will not ride over mine. He felt the book's weight in his mind, heavy as any chain. I will go to the king before he rides. He must hear truth before the woods hear his shout. Renly made a small wistful face. If you need steel at your back when you go, say the word. I can find you 20 men who won't flinch at lions. Ned shook his head. If I come to the king with an escort, the queen will cry rebellion, and Robert will wake from his wine like a boar in a snare. He looked to Barristan Selmy. Sire, will you come? Of course, the White Knight said simply. The king broke his fast in the Tower of the Hand more often than in his own hall when he did not feel like being king. That morning, however, the sound of dogs and laughter rose from the yard like smoke. Robert Baratheon stood by a litter of spears and boar spears, his great chest bound with leather, his cheeks flushed with the promise of a ride. Lancel Lannister poured him wine as if it were a holy office. The king's eye fell on Ned and brightened like a boy's. Ah, Stark, have it you, Robert called. Come to ride with us? We'll take that leg off if it slows you. Ned bowed. My leg remains attached, your grace. I came to speak with you before you go. Speak, then. Robert swigged. The dogs bunched at his boots. Cersei stood a little apart in ice-white silk, a smile like a knife hidden in the folds. She had Tommen's hand in hers, and the boy half hid behind her skirts. Joffrey lounged with the insolence of youth, a hand at the hilt of a sword he had never earned. Sansa hovered like a dazed bird, eyes fixed on the prince. Arya was nowhere that Ned saw, which meant she was exactly where she chose to be. He watched Lancel's careful hand refill the cup too often. The wine had a sweetness to it that morning. Honeyed, heavy. Ned tasted it in the air, and the hairs along his arms prickled. Your grace, he said steady. I ask you to delay your ride an hour, or two. There's treason in the castle. Robert laughed like a bellows. There's always treason in a castle. It's a rotten sort of place that breeds it. Who's been plotting this time? My brother? My small council? My wife? He cast Cersei a look that was almost fondness, almost contempt. Ned's eyes found Cersei. She held them coolly, amused, unafraid. Your Grand Maester, he said, and the laughter died. Pycelle? The king choked. Wine splashed on his lip. Gods Stark. The man's beard is older than my crown, and his wits are given to the queen, Ned said. He has sent her word of my letters to Lord Stannis. Matters meant for the hand and the king alone. I have arrested him. Cersei made a cluck that might have been pity. My Lord Hand is ill-humored at dawn, she murmured. Robert's face folded. Rage was quicker than thought in him these latter years. If he sent word where it should not go, he said, he'll rot a year in the cells and be glad for bread. Who else knew of your letter? The small council, Ned said, and the queen now. I do not accuse your brothers, your grace, but I would not have your enemies read your seal as if it were a book left open in a brothel. Robert took a breath that could have knocked over a tent. Then he spit to the side. We will talk of this when I return, he said, when I have blooded a boar. Until then, do as you will. You have my leave. Hold the city by its throat if you must. Only let me hunt. Your grace might wait until after the matter is settled, Ser Barristan said quietly. If there is treason. If there's treason, Barristan, it can wait until I've had a ride. The traitors won't flee on foot this morning. Robert shook off the council like rain. Come, come. I'm not made of glass. Cersei's smile did not move by a hair. Lancel tilted the flagon again. Ned caught the boy's eye. Lancel looked away as if scorched. Ned stepped close to the king. "Drink less," he said like a father to a son. "Eat more." Robert's grin softened. "Gods, Eddard, you were always a bad guest." He clapped him with a hand that would leave bruises. "Keep the city, then. But when I come back, I want that Maester shivering in front of me, and I want all this talk of treasons bled out. And I want a pig." The horns blew. The dogs bayed. Robert went laughing down the steps, and the hunt spilled out of the gate in a clatter of hooves and a confusion of feathers and breath. Cersei watched them go with her head slightly turned, as if listening to a note no one else could hear. When she at last turned her golden eyes upon Ned, they were utterly clear. "You overestimate the depth of your chair, Lord Stark," she said. "This city does not belong to a man in furs and snow in his beard. It belongs to those who understand it." "It belongs to the king," Ned said. "What remains of it?" she murmured, and moved away with Tommen in tow, a pair of Lannister guards falling in behind her like shadow. Ned stood until the last rider vanished into the dust beyond the gate. Then he returned to the council chamber, and the work that smelled not of leather and mint but of iron and coins and lies. The news reached them at dusk 2 days later, carried by a pale boy with sore feet. The boar had gored the king in the belly. Robert had been borne back on a litter between 2 mules, cursing as he bled, skin the color of old milk. The wound stank of leaves and wine and butchered flesh. There was no Pycelle to drown him in poppy. There was a barber surgeon named Belgrave who brought nettles crushed with salt and a needle heated in the smoke of rosemary. Ned came to the king's side the way a man came to cold water, quickly, with the knowledge that shock awaited him. Robert lay in a wave of heat and stink, swollen hands on his belly as if to hold his life in. The sight of him, broken and vast and suddenly small, cut something in Ned he had thought was all scar. Cersei was not there. Lancel was. The boy's eyes had rings beneath them, his mouth a slash of guilt. The white of Ser Barristan's cloak gleamed in the dim hall. Varys hovered like a scribe at a deathbed. Renly had vanished 2 hours prior, quietly, with Ser Loras Tyrell and 50 men whose boots made less sound than moths.
Stark, Robert raspet. Come closer.
"I smell like a pig, don't I? A pig that drank my cellars." "You smell like a king," Ned said, and the lie was love. He took the king's hand, and Robert held to him like a drowning man to wood. "I did it," Robert said through his teeth. "Killed the bastard myself. Took 3 of them to hold me up, but the spear went in. Gods, he was a big beast, bigger than the one on our banners. Cersei will shit a gold bar when she hears." "You killed it," Ned said. "I'm glad you did." He glanced up. "Bring water, clean cloth, lemon, and shut that door." When the door closed and the rustle of attendants drew back like a tide, Robert's eyes darted. "Varys," he said, "you get out. You've done enough spying." Varys sank away as if his bones had melted. Ser Barristan remained, rigid and careful. Lancel found a way to make himself small.
Ned leaned closer.
The king's breath rattled. "Each draw a battle." "Right," Robert said. "My will. With a quill if you have one hand that isn't a sword." He coughed, a sound that tugged at his bowels. "You tell Stannis he's to be protector of the realm and regent until my rightful heir comes of age. You hear me? Stannis, not Renly. Stannis is a stone. Renly's green fruit." Ned glanced at the boy Lannister in the shadow. "We should summon the queen," he said, "and the small council." "Damn the queen," Robert said, a spark of his old self brightening. "Damn her and her maid sons." "Right, I said," Ned wrote. His hand was steady. The words flowed and he shaped them as the king spoke them, and when he came to heirs, he wrote rightful with care. He did not set down a name. The parchment drank the ink, and the letters gleamed for a moment like dark wine before they dulled. When he had done, Robert dragged a signet against the wax so clumsily his thumb left a smudge. Ser Barristan witnessed, his jaw stone. "You be a father to my boy?" Robert muttered after, the tiredness dragging at his bones so that the words sank. "He's a little snot, but you can scour a snot." There's good in him, maybe. His eyes shifted. Bring Joffrey, then, you soft heart. Let me tell him something that will stop his ears for once. Ned did not move. Rest, your grace. Rest when I'm dead, Robert growled. He closed his eyes and sank into a fevered doze, his breath a saw on wood. Cersei came at midnight, gold hair bound back like a warrior's, white velvet shadowed with light. With her came Joffrey and Tommen, and 2 Kingsguard with faces like walls, Meryn Trant and Boros Blunt. They stank faintly of horse and wine and lilies. The stink of the wound swallowed them all. My love, Cersei said, and if sweetness entered her voice, it was at least well mimicked. The king did not wake. She looked to Ned then, implacable. You would unsettle a dying man with your talk of treason? I unsettled him with truth, Ned said. He felt the will like a weight in his sleeve. The hand speaks with the king's voice. Tomorrow he will speak for the last time. He has named Stannis Protector and Regent. Cersei's glance flicked to Barristan Selmy. The old knight's eyes were open and weary. He did not blink. He had always meant his oath. You should rest yourself, Lord Stark, the queen said. You look drawn. Grief becomes you little. Grief sits in the cells, Ned said, with a chain of office removed because its links were used to strangle truth. I will keep the door to this room. I will keep it until the king speaks no more. You presume much, she said, and then she smiled. No matter, the morning will bring clarity. She laid soft fingers on Joffrey's shoulder. The prince sneered at Ned around his mother's caress. Tommen only looked afraid. The morning did not bring clarity. It brought bells, and the sound of them, and a city that looked up to count tolls. Robert Baratheon went out with the sun's first light, his breath quiet at last. They wrapped him in a cloth dyed so deep and rich a red it might have been the inside of a wound, and laid him in sweet herbs and cheap dignity. And when the word went out of the red keep, the city paused, as if reminded of the giant who had trod with heavy steps through its wine shops and whorehouses. Then it resumed. Ned Stark emerged from the king's chamber with the will in his belt and the dead feeling like a rock in his palm. Ser Barristan walked beside him. Behind them flitted Varys, who had found his courage in time for the end. The queen stood in the hall, flanked by White, Blunt and Trant, and Red, Lannister men-at-arms with boar pikes turned upward. Joffrey wore crimson and a smile on his fish-belly lips. I will take the throne, Joffrey said, like a child announcing where he would sit at supper. The realm will take its time, Ned said, and the words felt like he'd placed his hand upon hot iron. He drew the sealed will. The king's last decree. Cersei's eyes did something very small. Littlefinger appeared as if from a crack, smiling too widely. Renly was gone. Varys did not smile at all. Read it, Lord Stark, Cersei said, sweet as salt. Let us all hear this final wisdom. Ned unfolded the parchment and read in a voice that made men in corners stop fidgeting. He read of Stannis Baratheon named Protector and Regent until the rightful heir came of age, and he read of the hand empowered to see it done until the Protector should come to the city. When he had finished, he drew breath. The Lord of Dragonstone is the king's brother. I will send for him at once. He will sit the council and speak for the crown until... Cersei's hand plucked the parchment from his fingers with a movement like a hawk stooping on a mouse. She did not tear. She folded it very neatly in half and then in quarters, and only then she tore once, twice, each ripped the sound of cloth being stripped from a back. She let the pieces fall like dead petals. White fingers tightened on white hilts. Varys sighed. Littlefinger looked to the ceiling, whistled soundlessly without pursing his lips. That parchment was a lie, Cersei said, bright as the edge of a dagger. You had the king's hand and you put your own words where his mouth was. My son will sit the throne. And the law will sit with him? Ned asked. The law sits where I put it, the queen said. Not today, came a voice like gravel in a dry riverbed. Ned turned, and for a heartbeat the hall turned with him. It had been trained to. Janos Slynt stood at the far end with a wedge of gold cloaks at his back. The faces in that wedge were a stew of low-born and middling. men who had been conscripted to hold a city together by tying it with fear. They advanced now with slow purpose. For a breath, Ned tasted the memory of the steps of the throne room in the later hours, the betrayal he had carried around like a splintered arrowhead. He waited. He remembered the chain falling into Barristan's hands. He listened to the echo of his own words to Slint, loyal ones, and wondered what price had been paid after, by which hand. "Captain Slint," he said, "you will place your men at the doors to the throne room. No one enters bearing arms." Slint's eyes traveled. Slick. They rested for an instant on Littlefinger, who lifted a brow as if to ask a joke, and then slid away to Ned. "As the Lord Hand commands," he said, so mild it was new leather. He nodded to his sergeants. The gold cloaks moved without fussing, setting themselves as ordered. Cersei watched them with a flat mouth. If there was surprise, she hid it like a coin sewn beneath a hem. She touched Joffrey's sleeve. "We will go to the throne." Ned looked to Ser Barristan. The old knight gave the smallest of nods, a promise to bear what he must. Together they went. The throne room had been built to make a man feel smaller than the crown. The iron between the high windows gathered dawn and ate it. Shadows had edges here. Peter Baelish leaned on the rail like a lover and smiled at nothing at all. The hound stood by the dais, helm beneath his arm, face in all its ruin glaring with permanent disgust. Lord Varys flowed along the wall. It was as if the room had grown them in place. Ned took his place below the throne, and the council gathered. The small folk who were allowed to see a little history pressed at the edges, mouths open, the smell of leather and onion in the air. Cersei led Joffrey to the foot of the throne. "Kneel," she said to him, low and hard. The boy knelt, suddenly awkward in his own limbs. He tried to look brave and only looked untried. "The king is dead," Cersei said. "Long live the king." "Not so fast," Renly Baratheon said from a doorway that had been empty a moment before, and Ned's heart misstepped. Renly wore a sword and a smile and the green of the Reach now. With him came men in green under a white rose. Tyrell men, though no Tyrell lord stood visible. Loras was a white knife in sunlight where there was none. He bowed almost without bending, his poise a weapon. Cersei's voice made the air sharper. "My lords, the last will has been obeyed," Ned cut in. "The captain of the watch has his orders. There will be no disturbances here today." He looked at Joffrey. "Your Grace," he said, and the title scraped his tongue. "You will sit until the Protector comes, and then you will yield to the law." "Yield?" Joffrey spat the word as if it had stung his lip. "I will never yield. I am the king. Bring me his head, mother." "My son," Ser Barristan said, and the tiredness in his voice could have drowned boats. "You do not speak thus," the hound snorted. "He speaks as he was taught." Slint's men held their line at the doors, shoulders pressed close. Ned saw 3 of his own Northmen among their number. Cloaks turned. Loyalty could be a cloak too, reversed at need. "Ser Barristan," Ned said, "seat the prince for now." He turned to Cersei. "You will go to your apartments and remain. Your sons will remain under watch, your daughter as well. You will be treated gently. No hand will harm you, but you will not make law while the realm decides the lawfulness of your claim." She looked at him very long. In that look, he saw the girl she had been once, mirrored in none of the flesh left to her now. Power had scoured her clean of softness. "You should have taken my children at midnight," she said, as if to herself. "Renly urged you to. My honor would not." "I know," she said, and laughed without mirth.
Stark Honor.
"It will be the song they sing when they bury you." Her hand fluttered like a white moth. In the corner of his eye, Ned saw Littlefinger shift, his mouth open and then closed as if something had just changed the flavor of the room. He saw Slint look to him again and receive a look that gave nothing back. He saw Renly's men poised like drawn bows. He saw Ser Loras with one hand on his sword, ready to cut air. He saw the hound roll his head on his neck like a horse smacking flies. "Janos," Ned said calmly, "do your duty." Slint did not move at first, and in that hemmed heartbeat the realm balanced. Then he raised his hand and chopped it down, and the gold cloaks closed around the dais and not around Ned. They put their shoulders between Cersei and the world, and spears came up, not outward but inward, to keep the small council from coming close. Ned looked at Slint. There was apology in the man's smile and a wolf's hunger. Littlefinger had tilted his smile a fraction left, as if to tip a coin into a cup. Then steel scraped not where Ned feared. Ser Loras Tyrell's blade whistled free, but he held it low. The hound had his helm on and his sword half drawn. Ser Barristan drew and planted it point down on the step below the first, as if to mark a line only he would cross. "Captain," Ned said again, still calm, "do you make war on the hand of the king in the throne room?" "We keep order," Slint said. "That's all we ever do." He gave a small shrug. "Order is where the queen is." "There is no queen," Renly said. "There is a widow and there is a mother and there is a usurper here." "Careful," the hound murmured, amused. Cersei bent and kissed Joffrey's hair. It was a tender lie. "Call a vote if you like," she said. "Let the city choose which Baratheon they prefer. Shall we ask the butchers and the beggars? I think they know a lion when they see one, and they know a stag that stumbles." "Enough," Ser Barristan said. His voice was not loud. It was iron. "We are sworn to guard the king. The hand has the king's last words in his sleeve, and we have all heard them. This room will see no blood." For a moment no one moved. It was as if a taut rope had been touched by an old man's fingers and remembered the ship it held. Then Slint twitched his fingers. His men eased their spears down a hand's width. "We will have a vote," Littlefinger said conversationally, as if they were discussing a tournament. "The small council will convene as soon as the city has stopped shaking. We will send for Lord Stannis. Lord Renly is plainly ready to be consulted." He smiled at the memory of the torn will as if it were a bawdy jest. "And in the meantime, the boy will sit, and he will sign nothing, and the queen will not wag a finger without 6 men to say whether the finger may wag." Cersei's eyes cut to him. For a heartbeat, the faintest shadow of contempt crossed her face. She had never warmed to Peter Baelish's kind of service, but she tilted her head a fraction. "Very well," she said. "Let us pretend at law until we have it." Ned's breath loosened a little. Perhaps he had stolen a day. Perhaps that was all a man could steal in this city. The day he stole he spent in iron. He doubled watches. He sent 50 men with Lord Beric Dondarrion and Thuras of Myr toward the Mummers Ford to bring fire and Crown's justice to Ser Gregor Clegane's raids. He ordered ravens to Old Town and to Dragonstone and to Winterfell and Riverrun both. To Catelyn he sent a shorter letter than he would have liked. Jon Arryn's widow had turned her Aerie into a trap where honor could be snapped like a rabbit's neck, and Tyrion Lannister was the rabbit that had escaped it. To Robb he said nothing but a father's words. "Listen to your mother, keep your sword oiled. Do not light a beacon because your blood is warm." To Stannis he sent 10 words. "Come at once, bring ships, bring law, bring steel." He sent for Janos Slint and put a purse on the table between them so fat it looked like a man's belly. "Coin for your widow," he said, "if you fall doing your duty. Coin for your sons if you disobey me and live. Men like you like to have maps. Here is one. Choose where you prefer to end." Slint grunted and fingered the purse like it were a woman's hip. "You speak plain, my lord. I have no patience for flowers," Ned said. "Lord Baelish speaks in gardens," Slint observed with a coward's boldness when the door was closed. "Lord Varys waters them." He spat. "You ought to know, Lord. No one ever keeps the watch. We keep ourselves." "Keep the king," Ned said, and was surprised at the ache in his voice when he spoke the word. Robert's ghost still breathed in his head. He went then to the black cells. Pycelle's chamber had been stripped of dignity. The old man lay on a rough pallet with his chain removed, though some instinct had made him mimic the weight with his fingers each time he spoke. Rats had gnawn one of the rushes. Pycelle had not noticed or had pretended not to. The old man looked smaller than his titles. "You have made an enemy beyond forgiveness," Pycelle said, without preamble, opening his eyes like a cat. "The queen will not forget this." I have made truth beyond denial, Ned said. If you had sent no letter, if you had not pried into the hand's seal like a boy, you would be free. I pried. Pycelle's laugh ended in a cough. Boy, I have outlived lions. I served Ares when he mumbled to his own fire. I served your Robert through his cups and his friends. I have kissed chains, yes. It is how a chain keeps a neck from snapping. What did you tell the queen that Jon Arryn asked you not to? Ned asked quietly. What did you pour into her ear while he was dying? Pycelle's eyes closed again, perhaps to shut out a memory, perhaps to make one. Jon Arryn asked me for a book, he said at last, and I brought it. He asked me to consider a boy's hair and a man's brow and to think of seed and branches. I told the queen he read too much. That is what I told her, Stark. If that is a treason, then treason is a leaf that grows on every tree. Did you send her the tears of Lys? The old man's smile cracked like ice. I am no poisoner. I am a coward, perhaps. Cowards do not pour poison. We pour words. He scraped his fingers together as if feeling the links that were missing. Varys is poison. The little birds peck at truth until it is pulp. Littlefinger is poison. He pours it in cups with coins at the bottom. I am old. Age is poison. It leaves you willing to pour anything that quiets a room. Ned looked at him long. I will not have you killed, he said. Not for this. You will be sent to the Citadel to be judged by the Conclave. They may strip you of your chain. You may die at Old Town with a novice bringing you porridge. Pycelle turned his head away to face the wall. His voice was almost small. Then send word for a novice who does not hate the smell of piss, he murmured. You will be given a bucket for your own use, Ned said and turned away, angry at himself for the salt he tasted. Outside the cell he found Varys as he had known he would. The eunuch folded himself into a sigh. The scent of confinement gives me a headache. But then grief does too. Stop sniffing my grief, Varys, Ned said. As you like. Varys looked up at him with soft eyes that had seen the inside of too many rooms where people died. You are moving pieces with a courage that makes me tremble, Lord Stark. But there is a piece you do not see. Tell me. The Queen holds the purse that paid Janos Slint yesterday afternoon, Varys murmured. And she holds the leash that keeps Ser Boros Blunt and Ser Meryn Trant yapping. But there is a hound without a leash in this kennel. He tilted his head in the direction of the yard. And then there is the spider's web that runs not between towers but across a sea. Speak plain for once. Varys's smile showed teeth he usually kept hidden. Dragonstone has sails. King's Landing has docks. Ships meet at night when men sleep. That is all. He bowed. If Stannis comes within a fortnight, you may keep your promise to the dead. If he comes later, you will be food for songs before harvest. Then Stannis must come faster, Ned said and left him. By supper time, the city had made its minds in pieces and told itself stories. In the Street of Flower, they said the queen had the king smothered with a pillow with golden fringe. In the Street of Silk, they said the king had choked on a harlot's breast. On the River Row, they said there was a new king tomorrow and a cheaper tax next week. In the Rat's Road, they did not say much but sharpened knives and waited to see where the meat would drop. In the Red Keep, men wrote letters and walked very carefully, and some men packed and did not bother for let.
Iares.
At dusk, Sansa found her father in his solar. She did not look like Winterfell. She looked like a story about Winterfell told in a southern hall, in silk and sapphires and a braid that had taken a woman an hour. She stood as if the floor hurt her feet. Her mouth worked as if it would cry at the wrong sound. Father, she said, will Prince Joffrey be king? They say he will be king tomorrow. Septa Mordain says his rightful place is... She faltered at the look in his eyes. Sit with me, Ned said, and she did, perched on a stool as if she were a bird answering the call of a branch. He told her nothing of the lineages and the seed, nothing of tears and poisons, nothing of the boar. He told her only that sometimes duty and desire cut like a blade in different directions, and that when that happened, a woman or a man must choose to be cut. He spoke too slowly for her fear, too quickly for his own regret, and when he stopped she had not understood. "I will be good," Sansa said at last. "I will do whatever the Queen says. I will make them like me. That is better than swords." "No," Ned said, so softly it was a prayer. "That is not better than swords." The next morning, Renly Baratheon had vanished with his green men, and the Tyrells sent went with him. Peter Baelish had not vanished. He did not vanish, he merely was and was not like a shadow, but he had moved. Varys had multiplied. Janos Slynt had doubled his men. The Kingsguard had tripled their pomp. The Queen had set the throne room like a stage, and the city was the audience. Word had gone out like perfume under a door. "Come and see the crown sit." They came. The nobles with candles and rings, eager to be seen seeing. The merchants with hands that smelled of counting. The soldiers with shoulders like doors. They filled the steps and the aisles and pressed to the rail. Joffrey wore a circlet. It was not a crown yet. It looked like a child had stolen something from a statue and found it heavy. Ned had prepared as for a storm. He had written orders in duplicate for Slynt, for Ser Barristan, for the Master of the Coin Gods. Peter would not heed them, and for the Master of Whisperers. He had placed men he trusted near each gate, Northmen with their hair bound back in strips of leather. He had sent a dozen men to the docks to watch for sails with candles instead of lanterns. He had told Arya to stay with Syrio Farrell all day. He had told Sansa nothing more and hated himself for it. Joffrey took 2 steps toward the throne and looked back to his mother. She nodded. He looked at Ned and scowled. He mounted the iron and settled himself like a boy pretending a giant's chair was his. The metal made small complaints. "My lords," Cersei said, and the hush deepened until the scrape of a boot on stone sounded like a slap. "We come to set the realm aright. His Grace Joffrey Baratheon is the Queen's son," Ned said, his voice ringing. There was no kindness left in it. "The realm will hear Lord Stannis speak before it lets a boy call himself king. That is law." A murmur like bees. Then something cut through it. The arrival of a man who had learned to move so quietly grown men did not hear him unless he chose. Davos Seaworth had the look of a sailor who had forced himself into a lord's doublet and was not comfortable. Beside him walked Stannis Baratheon. The hall seemed to empty of breath and then take it back in surprise. Stannis wore black turned Baratheon yellow only along the collar. His hair had receded to a widow's peak. His gaze made men look at their boots. He walked like a man pretending his motion was the natural motion of the room. He reached the step below the throne and looked upon the boy sitting in his brother's chair, and a muscle in his jaw worked. "Lord Stannis," Cersei said after a heartbeat, and the edges of her lips cut. "You come at last." "I came when the wind served," Stannis said. His voice scraped like oars. "I come to take up the task my brother set in his last words, and to read the law to those who have forgotten their letters." "Your sail was quick," Ned said quietly. "You had the wind at night." Stannis cut him a look that might have been respect if Stannis had respected looks. "The wind is where you find it, Lord Stark." He lifted his voice. "Joffrey Lannister, you sit my brother's throne. That is a jest that will cost lives if the room finds it funny. Leave it." Joffrey's face went white in anger, a rabbit's belly. "I am your king," he hissed. "Bow, traitor." Ser Barristan lifted his sword and planted it again. "The boy will leave the throne, if he pleases, and then return when the law has been spoken," he said. Cersei's hand brushed Joffrey's sleeve. He burned to jerk away but did not. He stood, because there was something in Stannis's face that even a spoiled boy understood, and stepped down. He did not go far. He leaned on his mother like he might claw the skin from her arm. "The law," Stannis said, "is not difficult to grasp if a man's head is hard enough. King Robert left a will naming me protector and regent until his rightful heir is of age. His heir is not this boy. His heir has black hair and the blood of storms end in him. There are bastards of Robert that climb like vines over the city's back walls. There is no bastard that climbs into the crown. The king had no trueborn sons." He looked at Cersei then. "Not by you. Royal heir shattered with 1,000 whispers." Cersei's face did not change. "What you allege," she said, "is treason." "What I know," Stannis said, "is law." Peter Baelish smiled like a man who had bet on 3 horses and was pleased to see any of them run. Varys's eyes crinkled. Janos Slynt scratched his nose and measured which way the smell came strongest. The hound looked entertained for the first time all morning. Ser Loras Tyrell was not there. Renly was on the road south in a green flood, carving his own crown from a garden. "The city will not suffer this," Cersei said, finally letting contempt show. "Do you hear them? They will riot. They will tear your ships apart. They will. The city will take what it is given." Stannis cut her off. "You have given it lies. I will give it bread." The fleets of Dragonstone and Driftmark sit in Blackwater Bay with holds full of barley and beans. The bakers of King's Landing will have them, if the bakers bake for the crown. If they bake for the lion, they will taste their flour mixed with water. Ned saw then something he had not expected to see on Stannis's face. A kind of grim, bald strategy that did not care what it looked like, only that it worked. The men at the back of the hall murmured in a different way now, with their bellies. "The Queen will withdraw," Stannis said, each word a nail. "Joffrey will remain under guard. Tommen will be taken to Storm's End as ward of the crown. Myrcella will be sent to Old Town to be schooled in the faith. The crown's laws will be seen, not discussed." He looked to Ned. "And a trial will be held for those who counseled treason, starting with a man you have already placed where he belongs." Pycelle sat in his cell and touched his fingers together as if counting links. He was very far away from the throne's light, as if the castle had turned its back on him. In the days that followed, others joined him. Men with hands that had reached too boldly into the Queen's will. Men who had sold coin and steel to preference over law. Janos Slynt did not join them, not yet. He had found places to stand in more than one shadow and never stayed long enough to be found when the sun moved. Cersei did not withdraw to her apartments. She withdrew to war. She sent letters and found them returned. She sent gold and found it heavy. She sent tears and found them ignored. She sent for her father and found him already marching. Gregor Clegane's men burned up the Riverlands like a harvest gone to the Carcrows. Tywin Lannister gathered swords under a banner that had always looked like it wanted to be fire. Jaime Lannister took command in the west and wore a smile like a child given a knife. Ravens beat their wings against storms. At Winterfell, Robb Stark read his father's words and set down the letter and looked at his mother. Catelyn Tully had the look in her eye of a woman who hears the river outside her window every night and knows its moods better than she knows her own. "You will not ride," she said. "Not unless the trident runs red first. We will do what the Lord Protector bids and hold the north." Robb clenched his hands. He was as impatient as a new blade is bright. He wanted to cut something. He nodded instead. "I will hold." At the Eyrie, Lisa Arryn read a different letter and fed it to a small fire. Her mouth made soft, repetitive motions. She looked at her son, who was half sleep and half sugar, and she stroked his hair with fingers like talons. "We will stay in our sweet nest," she murmured. "We will stay, we will stay." At Riverrun, Hoster Tully coughed blood into a rag and said names into sleep. Edmure Tully cursed and counted spears. The Blackfish smiled a very small smile at the thought of riding out again. He had missed it like a man misses a tooth he cannot stop tonguing. At Dragonstone, the Lord who had become Protector stopped long enough to look at the painted table in the shape of Westeros and admit, if only to himself, that it resembled a board more than a map. Knights' moves mattered. He sent Davos on errands that stank like fish and shone like coin. He sent his letters with a seal that bit fingers. In King's Landing, Sansa Stark learned to breathe in a city that would not. She curtsied to a boy who had been told he could not be king and who frothed like a cup left too long in the rain. She smiled to a queen who was calculating the distance to every dagger. She wept alone because there was no other place to pour weakness. Ned found Arya in the yard with Syrio Farrell, and saw in her movements something that made him afraid and proud in the same breath. A steel that would not bend until it shattered. Ser Barristan Selmy took off his white cloak one night and folded it as if it were his own skin. He looked at it very long. He put it on again in the morning and went to stand by a door. That was all a man could do with a life, he thought. Put on the thing that felt like a second skin and stand where he'd said he would stand. Peter Baelish continued to smile. He met Ned Stark alone one evening as if by mischance. His hands linked in a gesture of prayer, and he spoke for a time about the cost of bread and the cost of honor and how some currencies could be exchanged if a man knew the broker. Ned listened without moving. When Littlefinger had finished, he said, "There will be no bargain." And Littlefinger's eyes darkened as if a cloud had crossed them. "You will give this city to Stannis like a man dropping a plum into a well and call it justice," Peter murmured. "Do you know what Stannis does with plums? He pits them with his teeth. He makes jam and calls it bread. He will feed the small folk stone and call it porridge. He will feed you law and call it mercy." Ned's mouth was dry when he spoke. "He will feed the realm truth and call it what it is." Littlefinger made a small, sad tsk. "You were never very good at gardens, my lord." The trial of Pycelle was less a trial than a reading of a ledger. The old man confessed very little that would make a chronicler's heart beat. Only a litter of small guilts that, added together, looked like a rope. He had taken coin from a Lannister agent to send a letter a day sooner than it might have flown. He had delayed a bottle of cordial for Jon Arryn on a day he had no business delaying anything. He had spoken in the Queen's chamber of matters the king had discussed in council, and nobody had put a knife to his throat. He had been the resident of a court that used men like him the way a man uses fire when it is cold, and the court had left no corner of his conscience uncharred. The conclave sent a letter back that smelt of righteous dust and displeasure. The chain would be removed. Pycelle would be recalled. He would not return. They would send another, younger man who knew less of kings and more of recipes. Stannis read the letter and nodded once. "So be it. You could hang him," Stannis said when he and Ned walked out under a sky that finally showed more blue than smoke. "You would be within law." "Hang a man for being what the court made him?" Ned asked. "I don't think law was meant for that." Stannis made a disgusted sound. "Law is meant for men as they are, not men as songs sing them." Ned looked over the city. He felt very tired and very awake, and as if he had been awake all his life. "I sometimes think the songs remember something we've forgotten. And I think the songs are lies," Stannis said. "One thing is not a lie. Tywin Lannister marches."
Ned nodded.
"Then we must hold a city." "A city?" Stannis said, looking at the tangle of roofs like a man looking at knotted rope. "And a realm and ourselves." He was not wrong. The lions came along the Trident, and the wolves in the north bared their teeth behind walls, and the roses opened in the south around a young king with a pretty crown made of flattery and hope. In the east, a girl with silver hair and ash in her mouth walked beneath a sky that had never learned the word winter. In the far north, things that were not men found their footsteps again on paths that had been cold for 1,000 years. Ravens flew too often. Fires burned too long. Children grew up in the space between a bell toll and the scrape of a blade being whetted. On a night when the wind off the Blackwater felt like wet cloth, Ned Stark sat in the Tower of the Hand with no book open and no letter under his hand. He heard Sansa's footsteps in the hall and Arya's somewhere farther off, the soft scuffle of a dance that had become a flight. He heard the clank of the city at work holding itself upright. He heard a world changing as if stone could creak. Tomard came to the door and cleared his throat, the hawk's feather still caught in his hair. "Raven from the wall, Lord," he said. "You asked for all letters from there to come straight to you." Ned broke the seal and put his eyes into the cracked, fading ink. The words were not many. They were enough to set a different weather in the room. It was not treason, and it was not law, and it was not a boy on a chair of knives. It was a thing older and deeper than either. It was winter. He lifted his head. The city would eat itself with law and lions. The north would keep its counsel. The south would pluck its flowers and put them on graves. And beyond the wall something moved. He rose with a stiffness that no barber surgeon's mint could ease. He thought of his father's voice, and his own, and of voices that had not yet been born. He folded the letter once, twice, and slipped it into the pocket where the king's will had rested for a day and a night like a hot coal wrapped in cloth. It seemed right that Winter's words should replace a dead king's. Seemed right and terrible, both. He went to find Stannis Baratheon, who would not laugh and would not amuse himself with what had been sent. He would listen with that hard jaw and those harder eyes, and he would say the word war like a blacksmith says the word iron. Outside, the bells trembled, the gulls turned, the sea breathed as it always had and always would. In the yard of the Red Keep, Arya Stark put down her feet like a cat. In the Queen's apartments, Cersei Lannister counted knives. In the dockside taverns, men with salt in their hair and lies in their mouths told each other what they had seen and what they had not. In the black cells, an old man counted links that were no longer there and whispered the names of kings no one would remember. And in the throne room, for a little while longer, a chair made of the things men do to each other held no one at all.